in terms of being a landlord, what are
Mm.
like, how hard is it? Because I can imagine it's not easy, like dealing with tenants and whatnot, and say if they damage the property, like, so what are the dark sides of being a landlord?
The dark sides of your life. Do you know what? I put a lot of this out on my YouTube channel, The
Mm.
Property Hustle, because I'm just honest. Like, if I've had a bad experience, I'll just put it out there, let people know.
Man, that's good.
I've had 3 tenants now, over the past 3 years. The first tenant he was a good tenant, like he paid on time, everything was cool. He just complained a lot.
Mm.
Well, not complained. He would just let me know if there was any kind of issue with the property. Like, it could be as small as, oh, I've noticed something that he could fix himself.
Mm.
He would call me for,
Yeah.
which, I mean, I am the landlord, but sometimes you kind of want the tenant to have a little bit of common sense as to how to, like, fix things around the house.
Yeah.
The biggest issue I've had to face was replacing the boiler. But having said that, when I bought the property and I got, because every year you have to do an annual gas certificate assessment with your properties as a landlord, legally. And so when I got my gas guy to come and do the assessment the first year, he said to me at the time, he was like, "Oh, this boiler," because I had, you might not know what this, because people, when they think boiler, they think that kind of the combi boiler, that kind of white box that kind of sits maybe sometimes in your kitchen or maybe in the bathroom. But the boiler there's some properties that have what we call a back boiler. So the boiler is actually in the chimney breast.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So when he saw that, he was like, yeah, this boiler's got about maybe 2 years left in it. But but because he'd said that, in my mind, I'd already started accounting for the fact that I'm going to have to change that boiler at some point. So when the following tenant, the second tenant, called me last year to be like, there's black smoke, there's black smoke coming out of the chimney. I was like, oh God, something wrong here. So I called my gas guy. He was like, yep, your boiler's gone. You're going to need to replace it. And that was £4,000. £4,000, which, because the property, that was like 2/3 of my rent for the year gone on replacing the boiler. So being able to deal with things like that, and things with, if hot water breaks, if there's no hot water, if electricity goes, like, those are 2 very important things. That's like basic rights for a tenant. So if those go, you have to act fast. And sometimes it'll be, a WhatsApp at, like, you might be out in the club, like, partying or whatever, and you've got a message from your tenant being like, hot water's gone. I'm like, no, I'm like, yeah, got to get on it quick and as soon as possible, because you want to keep them happy.
No, most definitely.
I've had a tenant, my last tenant that left, basically got behind on rent, because to be honest, I think their lifestyle choices, the choices that they made. So they contacted me and they were like, oh, we're going away. They'd had a wedding coming up and they had their baby's christening coming up. And so they were then asking, can we delay on rent? And I'm thinking, but, like, logically, if like, you've got to keep your roof over your head, surely the first thing you want to pay when you're looking at your expenses and your breakdown is your rent. But they were happy to kind of forego their rent to then have like the best wedding that they could have. But for me, like, because they came to me and they said, look, this is our situation, please can you be lenient? And they'd said to me, this is the schedule that we think we can meet in terms of paying you back. I said, okay, cool. And I think as a landlord, you have to try and work with your tenant, particularly if they're coming to you with a suggestion. So we had agreed that they were going to pay me like half rent for 2 months and then pay me full rent on the 3rd month and pay up the difference. And I said to them, my concern is you're not going to be able to make up the difference at the end, because you're then going to have to pay essentially twice rent, 2 times the rent on the 3rd month, which you're already struggling now to pay just 1 month's rent. They're like, no, we can do it. Sure enough, they couldn't. So I had to chase them until I got it back. And that's what can be difficult, because you, as the landlord, you're having to pay the mortgage on a monthly basis. So if your tenant misses a payment, you're kind of screwed. But what I've done is I've taken out an interest-only mortgage. So I'm not paying down the debt. I'm actually just paying the interest. So my mortgage on a monthly basis is £94.67, I think.
Is this for the house in Nottingham?
This is the one in Nottingham,
Okay.
yeah. Which is considerably, like, whenever I tell people, they're like, huh? Like, I got friends in London whose mortgage is like $2,000 a month. I'm like,
I think
yeah,
my house, obviously my family's house is like 1 point something. I don't know, but 94 is very, very cheap.
yeah. It's cheap because I'm just paying interest. If I wanted to pay off the actual mortgage as well as the interest, I'd probably be paying in the region of like £200 to £300 a month. But the problem with that is that I wouldn't have much profit in the deal because my rent is £550. That's what I receive.
Yeah.
And then if I was paying both the mortgage and the interest, and off, okay, let's round it down. Let's say 500, and then let's say I'm paying off the mortgage and the interest at 250. Then as a landlord, I'm only earning 250 a month on a property. Whereas as I'm only paying about £100, I'm earning £400 a month.
All right.
You see what I mean? So always have to think about when it's, particularly if it's an investment, you want cash flow. You want to be able to make as much cash as possible to then be able to, if something like the boiler breaks down, you can pay it off. So that's why I go for interest only. But the only issue with that is when you come to the end of the mortgage term, you still have to pay off the money that you borrowed initially. So at the end of 25 years, I'll need to cough up 54 grand or sell the property.
Would that be all in one go if you had to?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That should be all right by then.
Well, you hope that you buy the property at a level where by the time you come to the end of the term, you can either sell it and pay off that 54 grand and then keep whatever the profit is, or you just renew onto a new 25-year mortgage.
Okay. Would you have to find a new lender, or would your current lender be able to renew it?
Current lender could renew it, but you'd want to look again into the market to see if there are any better lenders or people offering better terms. And this is why I always advise getting a broker, because a broker can scan the market. Often people, when they're buying the first house, the first thing they think of is going to their bank, the bank that they've been banking with for however many years. That is sometimes good because your bank knows you, but a bank's not going to tell you. If you go to NatWest is not going to say, oh, here's what we can offer you as a mortgage. But do you know what? Santander has a better product. They're not going to do that. They want to sell to you. They want you to remain as a customer. But if you go to a broker will say, okay, this is what NatWest, Santander, HSBC, all of these people are offering. And then you can make an informed choice as to which would be best for you. And then when you are given that mortgage option, you'll usually there's something called fixed term. You can either have a fixed or not flexible. Is it flexible? Fixed or varied. So you'd have either a fixed rate or a variable rate. Often it's best to go for the fixed rate, and you can either do that for 2 or 5 years. I prefer to do 2 years to fix my mortgage for 2 years, because then at the end of the 2 years, you can look into the market again, the mortgage market, and see, okay, who's got good products? Do I want to stay with my lender, or do I want to potentially change? The way interest rates are going, we didn't even think that the Bank of England interest rate would drop any further, but it has to 0.1%. So it's the lowest that it could ever be. So if you're buying property now, what you really need to be considering is, will you be able to keep up your mortgage payments if that interest rate is to rise significantly? When you're almost at the bottom of the bottom, the only way it's going is up. So stress test, look at the property and think to yourself, okay, if the interest rates went to 5% or 10% or 15%, because apparently they were at 15% at one point in time. Unfortunately, I wasn't invested at that point. Can you still meet your mortgage payments? Always do that, because you don't want to be in a position where you've bought this property that you're living in, which is essentially a liability, and you're having to work to be able to pay off your mortgage. Always plan for the future, essentially.
Definitely.